And next up we have Angela Walch. She's a professor at St Mary's University School of Law and a research fellow at the University College London Centre for Blockchain Technologies. Her research focuses on money and the law, cryptocurrencies, blockchain technologies and financial stability. Her talk is entitled CryptoSpeak. Thank you, Angela.
Hi, everybody. Oops. Okay, hi, I am so happy to be here today. It's a real treat to get to talk to people from different fields and different disciplines, and that's actually a big part of my talk today. So I'm going to be talking about talking in the space, which is pretty meta, and my talk today is consciously taking this up to this meta level to, in the context of our conversation about how to build a field of cryptoeconomic systems. So before I jump in, I just want to give you something to kind of percolate on for the rest of the talk, okay? So in 1897, right across the river over at BU Law School, there was a really important speech given. And it was given by Oliver Wendell Holmes Jr., who at that time was on the Massachusetts Supreme Judicial Court before he served for many years on the US Supreme Court. And the speech was called The Path of the Law, and it's seen as a real classic in legal theory, and clearly most of you should know that, given that I see a few lawyers in here, but not very many. So probably many of you have not heard of that. But there was a theme in that speech that is incredibly relevant to our discussion today, okay? And in this speech, Holmes talked about this unnecessary confusion, he called it, that comes from using legal terms that have moral, historical baggage, okay? The baggage of moral significance and ethical associations, okay? So when you think about words that are used in law, right, you have a duty to do something. Is that a moral duty? Is that a legal duty? Or this the same thing, a different thing? And he talked about how we can have this great confusion that we are not noticing when we pass from one domain to the other, okay? And the language, he says, continually invites us to pass from one domain to another. And we do so without perceiving it unless we specifically call our attention to it. And he actually speculated, I'm going to quote here, whether it would not be a gain if every word of moral significance could be banished from the law altogether, and other words adopted, which should convey legal ideas uncolored by anything outside the law. We should lose the fossil records of a good deal of history, he says, that come from these ethical associations, but by ridding ourselves of an unnecessary confusion, we should gain very much in the clearness of our thought, okay? So he wanted to get rid of words that had a lot of baggage in the law. Okay, so percolate on that thought. So today I'm going to talk about kind of the mess that we have in our vocabulary in cryptoeconomic systems. So I'll give you a kind of overview of that. I want to talk a little bit about why we have these language problems occurring. A lot of it has to do, I think, with the many different fields that come together and bring their own ways of thinking, their own frames of reference, and also their own words. I want to talk about what the consequences are of these language problems. I think there can actually be very significant ones, and I'll give you a few examples of them. And then finally, this is kind of the brainstorming part of the talk. I'm going to talk about, what are some possible things that we can do to address these, mitigate these language problems. I don't have an easy solution for you, but I'm wanting us to think together about that. Okay, so first of all, this should give you a picture of what I think about the language issues in the space. They're kind of just a big, old, huge, knotty, thorny mess, okay? And I've sat through a few of the talks this morning, and every speaker mentioned language issues in their discussion, okay? So they're the elephant in the room, and I think we need to talk about them explicitly. So just to give you a few examples of some of the words that have problematic meanings or contested meanings, right? Smart contracts, okay? Me being a lawyer, that one would be near and dear to my heart, okay? Are the smart contracts that developers talk about the same as legal contracts? No, but we've spilled a lot of ink in the legal domain trying to figure this out, and there's still a lot of discussion about, well, what do we actually mean by this word? Is a blockchain the same as a distributed ledger? We're still trying to figure that out. What's the difference between a cryptocurrency and a crypto asset? What does it mean for a system to be immutable? Are systems really trustless? Are they really permissionless? We got some new ones today that I heard in the talk about flexible Byzantine fault tolerance, talking about, well, maybe we need to worry about not just honest miners, but are people acting in a corrupt way, okay? So we've got a lot of words that when we take them into other contexts, they may mean different things to different people, okay? So the big mess. All right, where does this big mess come from? Why do we have it? So there's a number of reasons, I think, that this arises, and as I alluded to earlier, a lot of it, I think, comes from the fact that this is an incredibly interdisciplinary field, okay? So I've seen, again, in some of the earlier presentations, people talk about the fields that are coming together, and I've seen references to economics, distributed systems, cryptography, governance, political science, law. I think we make sure we have ethics in there. I know there's an anthropologist, at least one in the room, and I haven't seen anyone talk about record keeping or archival science, but that's definitely got to be part of the conversation, okay? So we have all of these fields, and each one brings its own jargon. I have learned a lot of new words just today from sitting in on talks by people from computer science, distributed systems, and cryptography. I have to go and look a number of them up afterwards. I'm not going to try and use them now because I'm not sure that I'll use them properly. But when this is a perennial problem in interdisciplinary research, right? When two fields come together, what language are they going to speak? Okay, something else that I think is contributing to the, if you're wondering what that picture was about, that's how I see all the different fields kind of spitting out their jargon, and it goes into this one big pot, and no one's really sure what happens once you get into the mix. Okay, another reason I think that we end up with these vocabulary problems is the space is so fast moving, right? There is new stuff happening every day, and all these different innovations, they're tweaking different things, and you don't know whether you should call the new thing the same thing as the old thing or not, and people within the industry are creating new terms for their systems. So it's not just academics who are bringing their jargon to the table. Industry is creating its own jargon, okay? And I see a lot of new jargon created just when I follow conversations on Twitter, right? You see disputes about, well, what does it mean to sync, right? To sync from your blockchain when you create a node and sync from the beginning. Does it mean from X point in time? Does it mean all the way back to the beginning? Can a system like, can any system other than Bitcoin be considered to be decentralized, right? Fights about all of these terms that have come to us, in many cases, from the creators of the systems themselves. Finally, I think another reason we're seeing these language problems in this space is because of it's a money-making field, right? And a lot of this has to do with marketing and people glomming on to different terms that happen to be hyped at the moment in a way they might get funding for their own project, right? So they call their project a blockchain, though it might share very few characteristics with something else that has been previously thought to be a blockchain. So all of this, again, leads us to that mess that I showed you. Okay. Ooh, I'm going to hide this from you. Okay. What kinds of things can happen with this big mess? Okay, I don't think it's simply a semantic problem or something that we can say, oh, you're just worrying about nothing here. You're a grammarian and stop scolding us about language. I actually think it can have real world impacts. And, okay, sorry, something floated across my screen there. Some of the real world impacts that we can see is that these words end up in laws, okay? And I have an example here for you of one that I really hate, which, sorry to be mean to Arizona, but a few years ago, in 2017, their legislature passed a statute that was meant to enable smart contracts to be used in commerce. There's been a lot of discussion amongst lawyers since then that this was actually not a necessary statute to pass. It actually ended up muddling what the legal position would be. However, what's very interesting is their definition of blockchain technology, okay? And I put it up here for you to see. Distributed ledger technology that uses a distributed, decentralized, shared, and replicated ledger. They don't define these anywhere, by the way, which may be public or private, permissioned or permissionless, or driven by tokenized cryptoeconomics or tokenless. Good, I don't have to tell you what's funny about it. You're laughing on your own. Awesome. Okay, the next line, it gets better. The data on the ledger is protected with cryptography, is immutable, the data is immutable, and auditable, and provides an uncensored truth. This is in the law, actually. The data provides an uncensored truth. So I don't know what a judge is supposed to do if there's something fake or false on a blockchain because, you know, the law says the data on a blockchain reflects an uncensored truth. Okay, sadly, this type of language has served as a model for many other states, and we are still seeing states adopt definitions of blockchain technology that share a lot with this original problematic definition. Okay, so the field of law can be muddled, and that can have real consequences for people, right? Maybe you want your blockchain technology to be, your project to be treated a particular way under the law. Well, are you going to be able to satisfy this definition of what a blockchain is? Do you have to try to contort your technology to do so in order to get the specific treatment that you want? Okay, so the words of law actually matter, which means that problematic words from the space ending up in law matter. Okay, another bad thing that can happen with problematic language. I actually think it's not an overstatement to say that misunderstandings about language, imprecise terminology can actually potentially be a source of systemic risk when we are talking about crypto systems that are intended to replace very significant social systems in our world. Money, finance, many other things, but particularly I'm thinking here of money and finance. That is because when we don't have clear language about what things like decentralized means, or immutable means, or permissionless, or trustless, when we don't know what those things mean, our assessments of the characteristics of the system may be flawed. We may think that two very different systems actually have the same characteristics and may make risk assessments of those systems that are inaccurate, right? Certain systems, the systems are all unique. Therefore, they have unique risk. If we conflate them all with problematic vocabulary, we miss our risk assessments. And if we do that on a widespread basis or with significant social systems, it can be a big problem. Okay, so you're probably crying about all that right now, but we're here to build, okay? We're gonna build a new field, and we're gonna try to see what we can do to solve some of these problems. As I said, I don't think there are easy fixes to them, but you gotta try, right? So we have seen people trying to make sense, to impose order upon the terminology. One way they're doing that is writing taxonomies of the space. There have been a lot of different taxonomies that have been created over the years. You can go and look at them. It started to come in kind of, many of them were generated after 2016, beginning of 2017. The moral is, though, none of them have really stuck, I would say, and it's reflected by the fact that people continue to generate new taxonomies, okay? Is a virtual currency the same as a digital currency, the same as a cryptocurrency? These things are still unsettled, okay? So we have movements to create taxonomies. We have standards groups who are working on this. ISO has been working. I have not seen like the final output of the group, but again, I'm still perceiving us talking at cross purposes in my discussions with people in the field. Okay, so we have efforts. What are some other things that we can do? Well, one of the things we can think about is maybe it's helpful to think about this from a timing perspective. And we do this when we're thinking about regulating different things in the law. When a new innovation comes up, the regulator's pressure is to figure out when to regulate often, right? If you regulate too early, you may cut off productive innovation or shape the industry in a particular way. But if you regulate too late, people can get hurt, but you may have also enabled the formation of systemic risk and a widespread consequence of it. So I think there's a similar dilemma here with how do we impose order on the way we talk to each other, right? These taxonomies, maybe they haven't stuck for a reason. Maybe they haven't stuck because we're still too busy figuring out what things are in order for the words to stick, and there's too much new stuff continuing to happen. So maybe we have to wait for this kind of explosion of innovation to slow down and then take stock of where we have been and try to redraw some categories. You know, Holmes's idea about getting rid of the words that bring baggage and, you know, coming up with new stuff, that doesn't sound so bad. I'm not sure how realistic that is. I don't know if we're going to have like a language police in the space that says, thou shalt not call this a blockchain unless, right? But it'd be nice, from my perspective, it'd be nice to know what it was. I don't think that's going to happen. Okay. Building a field. So that's what we're trying to do here, right? We're talking about how do we build this field of cryptoeconomic systems. So some of these ideas came up in Jackie's talk. She was talking about collaboration and the need for collaboration. That is what this Cryptoeconomic Systems Journal is attempting to do, to create this as a field where multiple different disciplines come together with the hope, I think, that not only will we all be submitting to this journal, but we'll actually be reading each other's work and learning from each other's work. It's critical that we don't just sit in our own little silos, that the law people doing cryptoeconomic systems only read the stuff that law people are writing, and the economics people only read what economics people are writing, etc. You actually have to try to learn from the other fields and understand what developments are in their fields, in the other fields. So there's this concept in legal research. It's called shepherdizing, which basically means that when you cite a case, you have to go back and see if anything has changed about how courts have been treating that case. Has someone overturned it or something in the interim, okay, since you last wrote your paper? Okay, that's called shepherdizing because for commercial reasons, but it became a verb like, you know, it's like the Kleenex or something like that, or to Google. Here I think shepherdizing maybe is actually useful to think about in that when you write a piece, maybe we ought to be checking what new developments are in these other disciplines that are composing the field, right? Maybe when I write a legal research paper, I should be going back and checking on what kinds of things have come out about the security of cryptoeconomic systems or new threats to them in order for my legal analysis to actually hold up. That will be really annoying and also meaning it will add time to any research project, But also, I mean, we run into the dilemma of, are we qualified to assess each other's work or even to understand it? Which means that we can't just read it, but we actually have to try to learn from each other. And I guess we can do that at conferences, places like this where we speak. I told you I already learned a whole bunch of new words, just listening to a few presentations this morning. And that has happened to me whenever I've gone to these interdisciplinary settings. And I value them the most. I feel like my knowledge jumps forward the most when I go to these things. Okay, so I'm gonna give you an inspirational image here. This is the Rosetta Stone, right? And the Rosetta Stone was kind of seen as like this breakthrough in our understanding communication and figuring out what others were saying, okay? And maybe we could think of it as, you know, we all speak our own languages, but it would be nice if we could know that while we're speaking our own language about these systems, when I'm telling someone about these systems from a legal perspective, or when an economist is telling someone about these systems from an economic perspective, et cetera, that we're actually all saying the same thing, right? That the translation is consistent from field to field. So that is what my hope for us would be. I'm not, you know, I have some ideas, and I'm hoping you guys have some ideas for how to get there, but that's the ideal. Okay, finally, I'm just going to wrap up now. Problems are everywhere with terminology. So I don't think this is an issue that we can ignore. The fact that we have so many disciplines coming together here really helps to create and make this a significant problem. It's also really exciting and why it's so much fun to work in the space. I think there are actually potentially significant consequences of not trying to address this problem, of not recognizing it as a problem and trying to hopefully mitigate it somewhat. I think it can actually have real-world consequences. And finally, how might we work to build these common understandings and vocabulary? Not going to be easy. We really have to collaborate to share and to learn across disciplines. I think this means not just coming to conferences like this or submitting to these journals, but ideally it would manifest in people doing cross-disciplinary papers together, right? Me as a law person doing a paper with someone who's a distributed systems expert, something like that. Okay, meeting at conferences, I mentioned that there are some that have been doing this already, and they're terrific. So the Reg at Tech Forum at Wharton, Kevin Warback's here, the organizer of that. They've been meeting, I think, since 2017 or so on a periodic basis. It's a global group that comes together from multiple disciplines and also includes regulators from all over the world thinking about these issues. And I think everybody learns a lot every time. The Cambridge Center for Alternative Finance did a DLT conceptual framework a few years ago. I got to work on it, and what was neat about it was that it brought people from all disciplines and also industry people in to kind of share knowledge and learn from one another. There was just a workshop at UBC, University of British Columbia, earlier this last summer. Again, an interdisciplinary workshop, and here I think this is a kickoff of something exciting. And then finally, I think we have to use our common sense and critical thinking, right? We should know that we shouldn't be using words in our own fields when we don't know what they mean in the field that they're coming from. It's a cop-out, it's lazy. I think it's happening a lot, and I'm hoping that we can stop doing that. So I look forward to your ideas and questions, and that's where I'm wrapping up. Thank you.
Just use this mic to ask for questions. Great, thanks, Angela. Do we have any questions in the room? Yes.
Actually, suggestion. Hi,
Great.
Angela. I would invite you to come to our session tomorrow morning. I'm from the Vienna University of Economics. We started an interdisciplinary cryptoeconomics research institute there, and we're doing this in an interdisciplinary way. One of the challenges is the language barrier and the disciplinary bias, and the laziness of transcending your disciplinary, because it's hard work, as you said. So I would value it much if you could come, and if we can see where we can work together in the future. So basically, our We have a system thinking approach. We're currently writing research roadmap for Cryptoeconomics research roadmap, and we will be explaining tomorrow why we need system thinking and why blockchain networks are complex systems, and what the next papers are that need to be published. And obviously one of the things is Rosetta Stone. We have that on our research roadmap.
Yes.
So we would need to work together with you. So.
Yes.
Okay, let's
Very
connect
good.
with you. Yeah.
Very good.
Any more questions at the back?
I can't think of another way to ask the question. There's a wet blanket. I apologize for the negativity.
Oh, great.
In it. There was a famous philosopher, Wittgenstein, who said, "Whereof one cannot speak, thereof one should be silent." And he meant whereof one cannot speak clearly, which it seems to me is what you're trying to say here also. He came to the conclusion that we will never be able to speak. Because we are forever creating new meanings of words, right?
Yes.
Take a phrase like "Make America Great Again." That was a very straightforward statement 5 years ago, and now we will have 100 different reactions to that. And so to nail down the meaning of words, he was saying, is a fool's errand.
Yes.
Goose chase, wild goose chase.
Yep.
It's better than fool's errand, I apologize. But we can still try to communicate,
Yep.
right? I mean, we have to acknowledge that we speak with different lexicalities all the time, and so the interdisciplinary context is important, but not by trying to nail down the words.
Yep. I was pretty much joking when I was saying that we have to nail down these words, because I completely agree with you. Language is not something that we can control. It's fluid and it's ever changing, and words, another one of the reasons that I think we're seeing these problems with language here that I didn't mention is word taint, right? And that's what you're talking about with the "Make America Great Again" slogan, right? Even in the blockchain space, words have taken on taint at different points, and people have chosen a new word to try to avoid that, right? Going from initial coin offering to security token offerings, et cetera, and we're trying to wash away maybe stigma. I agree with you. There is never going to be a perfect solution to this. I think we can make strides here and hopefully communicate with additional clarity by acknowledging this as a problem and working to build these bridges across our disciplines. But excellent point, I agree.
Okay, we have probably time for one more quick question over here. Do I see a hand?
Can I do it? I'm over here, yeah.
Okay.
Okay, so I think that a good outcome of the interdisciplinary effort might be that we academics in different fields have some common language that we can use, but it's going to be tricky to solve the problem because a lot of the things you mentioned seem to be caused by, for example, people deliberately or in a self-serving way using wrong languages. I think you've called it the veil of decentralization. I've heard the industry call it block washing, but it means the same thing, kind of trying to play off the ambiguity in a way that favors you. And so I forgot what the point of the question was. Is if we do it as academics and improve it, then do you think that will have if we do a very good job of being coherent ourselves, will that sort of spread out?
Maybe we have a duty to call out things like that. Yeah. I don't know. When we see people exploiting ambiguities in the language for their benefit in a way that is misleading, maybe we have a duty to call it out. I don't know.
Okay, let's wrap up there. Thanks,
Great.
Angela.
Thank you.
Thank you.